All right, I'm gonna work on the elevator a bit here. Again, not a whole lot to do. Basically just a horn and a servo install. Yeah, so if you're doing servos in the tail, which I'm doing a trusty old BLS 173, you basically are gonna have two horns, which look like this. There is a pack of 4 if you're going through, like when you're doing pull. And these are kind of like the rudder where they have the little, kind of interlocking tabs inside them. So if you're going to use pull, you're going to find this pack, and these ones, I guess you can save for a rainy day. You'll have also 2 packs of the bearing links and 2 little rods. On the stab itself, you're going to have, obviously there's the mount inside there. I guess if you can see that, 4 holes. I already pre-drilled those, so go ahead and use a little pen drill or something to drill those out. They are laser cut, but mine weren't actually through. In here as well, maybe you can see it. There is tough. There's like a clamp there. You can kind of see it maybe on the very left-hand side. There's a little clamp. So there's 2 of them, one for the front, one for the back. That actually clamps the socket around the tube, so that's how they retain the stab. There's just that clamp, so that's already in there, so you don't have to do any kind of stab retention or anything like that. It's already marked for at least on the underside, the bottom side, for the horn that's going to go in here. You're going to use, if you're doing the servos and the stab, you're going to use this one. If you're doing pull, you're going to use that guy that's more angled towards the fuse. So the one that you're going to use is the one that's, I guess, perpendicular to the hinge line. So yeah, you're going to have to grind that out, slot it. Other than that, there's really nothing to do here. I am going to likely route my cable for the servo out the front here. If you go to the back, there is like a former in here. There's another former right here. So if you just kind of reference yourself, basically the front of the tube, there's a former. There's another former right up here somewhere, and there's a horizontal former, about here. So if you use where the front of the stab is going to go, which is roughly there, there's the hole. So if you exit the cable kind of at the front of that hole, it's going to be on the underside of the horizontal former and in front of this former. So your cable is going to exit, go past this former and up to the front. So it's not a bad spot. I'll have to make a mark here and cut a little slot for the cable exit. So, but I'll do that once I get the servo in place. So yeah, pretty basic. I'm just going to go ahead and mount the servo in here. I have to figure out where to cut the slot here for the linkage that's going to come up through the stab, and just figure out which orientation I want this servo to be in. So we're going to thread up these bearing links and just sort of figure out some distances where this all goes, grind this slot in, set this up and start to sort of figure out that geometry, and then I'll get the servo installed the right way. And then I will slot this hole out. Alright, so I slotted out the my elevator horn and removed the tape. There's a hard point, kind of a slot in here, so much like the rudder, I'll fill that with epoxy micro balloons. Probably do that tomorrow. But that's in there. The slot that was marked was bang on the money, so no problem. I did throw some tape on there. This is actually where the face of the rib is in there, just to confirm that it was parallel with this arm or horn, I guess. And then I just put some tape on here because that's what I'm going to draw on to mark the slot for the servo arm. I did make up the push rod real quick. I don't know if that's the right length or not. But it did allow me to kind of confirm that the servo really should go in this orientation, because if you kind of take the link, put it there, obviously it's, you know, more near the front. You know, the geometry of this is that, you know, this push rod angle, the arm on the servo needs to be perpendicular to it, so that the servo arm is going to be kind of like so, and then the push rod like that. So it's a little, these setups are a little bit finicky to get exactly right. So, you know, I got to cut the slot, get the servo powered up, center it, kind of figure out what that offset angle needs to be in order to make that perpendicular to the arm. So it's a little bit of filling around, which I'll do a bit later. Fish through the lead, so pretty easy, just kind of bend it, get it through there, you know, use gravity to help you out and get a set of forceps in there to pick the servo lead out of there. So I'm going to run that. If you want to bury it in there for now, it's fine. Get out of the way. So really, you know, I'll mark this up. It'll just be kind of like a racetrack oval slot. Be a little careful. I'm going to do this while its servo is installed. The servo is right up against the skin of the stab, so you got to be a little careful that you're not going to grind out past where the servo is. So I'm going to mark, kind of, you know, use a set of calipers, identify where the face of the servo is, figure out, you know, how wide to make that slot, you know, probably 10 millimeters or so, and then just the length, and draw it up and cut it. So I'll do all that tomorrow. To both stab halves, both are going to be identical. Get all these things set up, get this glued in, and then then we can probably power everything up and get these servos sort of set up, and then honestly the stabs can be set aside and we can start doing the same thing on the wings. All right, so gonna finish off doing the elevator servos. I've actually already completed one, just to get it all figured out. So I'll just video the second one. Couple little things. You know, I'm using a BLS 173, and there isn't tons of space, you know, once the arm comes through the skin, and it is just the way it's oriented from, you know, the horn on the elevator to the control arm on the servo. You know, you kind of have to have it on the outside of one and on the inside of the other. So what it does is it puts, you know, this bearing link on the servo side, so it's up against the case, right? So it can only move so far before it hits the case. So normally I'd use a 6-point arm because you don't really need that much throw, and it just reduces, you know, sort of the amount of slop that you end up getting at the surface. But I had to use a 4-point arm in order to get the clearance above the skin and the case to make sure I had enough throw. Maybe you don't need quite that much, but definitely it's pretty close. So I figured I'd err on the side of caution. So I went with a 4-point arm. I made the hole a little bit bigger so it kind of clears everything. You could probably make it the width of the slot if it, you know, if you don't need so much throw to get all the way down. Like, it'll go pretty far. I haven't really actually measured it, but it will go decently far before it hits the skin. Like, you probably get, you know, that much up throw, which is way more than you need for normal flying, maybe for a spin. And then down throw, you know, you're hitting the skin about there. So it's not also very even, honestly. It should be, but yeah, I hate mountain servos this way. I wish people wouldn't do it. You know, you do have to get that geometry correct there. So I could possibly adjust that slightly to get better down throw, and maybe you don't need to go all the way through the skin, but, or I mean, it may be as big as this, and then you can just kind of let this go right up to the skin. But anyways, that's where I'm at right now, so I'm gonna duplicate it on the other side. We'll go from there. First things, You need your servo obviously with the grommets. This does fit right in the hole, so no problem. You know, a couple sets of the bearing links, and then there is a pack of 2 of these little threaded rods. They are not left hand and right hand, they are both right hand threads, so it's not a turnbuckle. So I don't know what thread pitch it is. It's probably a metric 2, so it's pretty fine. But yeah, you are limited then to basically half a rotation. It's not an infinite adjustment like a turnbuckle is. So yeah, you go ahead and thread these together. You know, they're mostly on. You know, like if you look at this one, they're pretty much, well, it's hard to see, but they're mostly threaded in there, big chunks. So don't be afraid to thread most of it in. So I'm going to go set these up, bolt it up on one side of this. Just kind of see where I'm at, and then I'll set that slot kind of parallel to that arm. You want it basically just so the slot was just past the edge of the bearing link, so it can kind of slip on past if you need to. Yeah, and then we'll work on getting the servo in there. We'll get that slot cut to get the servo in there, and then get the arm figured out. All right, so I got the slot cut in and the servo put in. The slot I did is 12 millimeters wide. It's 25 millimeters long to the center of the arcs, so it's probably another, 12 past that, so it'd be 37 total end to end, and that seemed to work out pretty good. When you screw your servo in, don't forget, route that cable up to the front there. Don't forget to pre-drill those holes a little bit, maybe a bit of CA if you want to harden up the wood. Now you got to center your servo, so for this I just literally use the S.Bus menu to center it. That is how I set my servos up on the S.Bus. The only thing I really change is obviously the channel and the deadband. I lower it. I will occasionally change the neutral offset if I do want to do that like permanently instead of using subtrim. The reason why I do that just kind of it keeps the subtrim screen clear, and you don't have these wild subtrims all over the place, so you can get everything perfect, zeroed out, leave your subtrim alone, and then if you do switch servos, you literally just kind of match it up in here. That's really it for the S.Bus menu. Once that's good, you can just unplug the servo from that and then plug it into a receiver, which I got kicking here, and just plug it into the S.Bus too, and a battery, and then it's your servo sitting there good to go. So then to sort of position it, I got a bunch of 4 points. I've cut them off, so this is number 4. So every Futaba servo arm has 4 numbers on it. They're at the base here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's just the orientation of the spline to that arm. So if you ever do change servo arms, make sure you line up the numbers, and then that'll get you the exact same position. So yeah, I mean, really, that's what the other one looks like. So I'm just trying to get a little bit about the same. It's sort of slightly forward of 0, not too much. Actually, that one looks pretty close already. So really, I'm just going to trial and error this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth till I kind of get it, where it's neutral on the tip here, and it's, whatever word is there, and I get even throw. I'm going to check it even throw on the elevator at kind of max deflection. So this one is doing about 18 millimeters or so at the tip. So I'm just going to basically get this, whatever it is. If it's 17 or 18, I'll try to get it about the same, and I'll adjust this. I might use different arms till I get that right, till I get basically the same amount of up and down throw. And that means it's proportional, right? You're basically in the exact midpoint of that servo travel. So as this angle is, the angle of the servo is changing and the angle of this rod to the linkage is changing, all that is even both for up and down motion. So a lot of trial and error, a lot of fiddling around with which horn works the best. Try not to do it with subtrim, get it super close mechanically, and then if you do have to, later on we'll tweak it, you know, with the actual setup, we'll get the throws matched exactly, but at least that way, you know, it shouldn't be so far off that you have like huge percentage differences from one stab half to the other. So I'm just going to go away here and do a lot of fiddling around with this and get it right. You know, you're going to have to screw this in and out and on and off here a bunch of times. So we'll get that done, and then I'll come back when it's all finished up. All right, so I finished up this side. Basically ended up about the same as the other side, sort of angle, and it should really. And another way to check this is to just measure the length of the push rod. So once you get one side set up, just kind of copy it, and then, you know, center the arm, like get the arm in the right position in this, you know, the elevator centered. And so on mine it's about 70 millimeters, you know, from kind of center to center of the push rod. So that's another way to just sort of validate, is just make that the exact same on each side. And then really, as long as, you know, your elevator centered, this arm should be about in the same position. So you can kind of tweak it to make it the same. Don't forget, put your servo screw in there, Loctite up these nuts. And so then we're going to take foam here, and it came with 3 pieces, so there's 1 extra of foam. So we're going to put that on the root, and then using the foam, what I did was I cut, and I didn't show you this, is pretty straightforward. Put the foam over the, you know, over the tubes where they're supposed to go, right? And then you end up with a location. If you just take these out, this kind of gives you a nice, neat and tidy way to mark, you know, where to do the hole for the cable. So there is nothing in the way if you do it that way. There's a former, you can maybe see it. It's kind of right in front of the stab tube, and there's another former up above horizontally, maybe about here. So there's a former right here and right here, but this is out of the way, and then you're clear sailing to the front. So then you can run your servo extension down the fuse and pick up these elevator servos here. So I'm going to cut one in on the other side too. Doing the exact same method, just use that foam, mark it, and then just use a little, you know, cutting tool on your Dremel to open that up. And then, yeah, really kind of looks like this when you're done. That's what the foam looks like on the root. Sticks pretty good, so just, you know, stick it on there, line it up nice with the stab tube holes, and away you go. You know, clean out your retention holes. There's 2 of them, one there, one there. It's a metric 3, I believe, so a 2.5 millimeter socket or ball socket wrench fits in there. So clean those up. Maybe a bit of schmag in there from when they built it. Yeah, and that's really the stabs. Kind of wrapped up. There's nothing else to do on them. You can put them aside, and we'll move on to the next steps. One last thing, I kind of decided here right at the end, I didn't actually do this when I did the stab cables, but I'm going to put a tube in there. I just taped the cables in. I figured I'd fly it like that initially, but honestly they kind of bounce around in there, which I don't exactly like. So I'm going to quickly make a tube, and this is normally how I do it. I have this kind of random tube. I don't know why I have it, but I have it. It's probably 5/8, 3/4, something like that. Anything kind of similar will work. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a guide to hold it onto hold the paper onto the tube. And then I'm just going to use brown paper. You could use like newspaper, you know, magazines, kind of whatever. Something relatively light. This is like a shipping, I don't know, paper, like from a roll like this that I have sometimes. I don't know where I got it from, but used to pack stuff up. So all I'm going to do is basically just spiral wrap it. There. So just kind of spiral wrap it. I don't know. I'm just going to literally guess. Like, you don't want it too sharp with an angle, but you also don't want it like too shallow, I guess, either. And start maybe right at the end. I'm going to cut the end of this off anyways. Is normally what I do. I kind of wherever I tape it here, I just sort of cut this off because I don't really want this end sticking inside there. And then just literally kind of wrap it. That might have been a little, yeah. You kind of got to get a feel for like the angle you want to go at. Like I say, you want to go fairly steep because you don't really want a ton of extra paper, right? Even that's not steep enough. I'm gonna get it really steep here. You know, because then you're just adding a bunch of weight and paper for no reason. That's not too bad there. We're gonna try to like pinch this up tight here, right? I'm gonna use just packing tape. I'm just gonna take a small piece of this to hold it. Get it, you know, nice and tight, wrap nice. We are going to tape this all up to cover it up so it's not like exposed, but yeah. Just sort of tape up that loose end. I'm just going to cut the rest of this off here and save it. And then another one, honestly that's probably almost enough. And you know, this one you can kind of almost see the angle you had on the last one, right? So you basically want the same. I'm going to do it this way. That's how I'm going to do it. Kind of start. Try to keep it about the same. Kind of line it up and same thing. Try to get it tight, you know, so there's not any real loose or bulge spots. We'll just take this end up now. The beauty of this, if it doesn't seem right, you can like super easily just redo it. It's not like you're spending a ton of money on materials or anything. See this end seems like it's sort of loosened up. And it doesn't really have to be perfect, you're just going for a tube for the, the cables. So just try to keep it as tight as you can. Wrapped up if you gotta add a bit of tape. Kind of hold it as you're doing it, no big deal. Like I say, we'll kind of cut these ends off anyway, so if you want to tape them up. Honestly, that's probably almost long enough. I'll do a little bit more and then we'll cut off whatever's left over here. Again, kind of line it up. Roughly with the previous one. Tape it on there. These middle ones, try not to get them taped to the tube because they're gonna have to come off. So if you tape it to the tube, it just might kind of suck a little bit getting it off. So I'll try to just sort of tape it to the paper itself and then go from there. start that up kind of tight, tape it on there. And this one, it's not going to go that far because it's right at the end. And so we are just literally going to tape this up right here. Okay. So it's going to have that. I'm literally just going to now tape this whole thing with packing tape. So I'm going to take this along, stretch this out. I'm going to try to get this relatively flat, and I'm going to go each side, and I'm just going to kind of wrap it around. And I don't really care if there's too many creases in here. It's not that important. It almost wraps all the way around, so I'm not going to bother to fill in that little extra, but I'm going to do the opposite side to the next one, so it's somewhat sort of like every other piece is sort of covering the exposed side. Just roll that around. And then just a short piece to last bit here. There's not a lot of science to this. So yeah, that's it. So I'm just going to cut this end off where I started here. It was taped, remember it was taped to the tube, so we're going to get rid of that. And it wasn't taped to the tube anywhere else, so should be able to pretty much just pull this off. It is tight, so it might be take a little bit of force. Try not to always grab the supported part, because you're going to squish it a bit otherwise. And I'm just going to trim this. Find my scissors, I'm just going to trim this up a little bit, just so the end is not all kind of janky there. And then this end, I'm going to cut this back off where we... So there you go. There's your tube. That tube weighs... I'm going to get my super little scale here, because it's light. 8 grams, so not too bad. I don't know what some of the other tubes are, but yeah, 8 grams is not bad. So I just literally put some dabs of silicone on this, and so I have the cables already through the fuse. The cables are already in here. I'm just going to take and kind of feed it down the cables and pull them out, and then I'm just going to, dab some silicone and just stick it in the fuse on the side and let it sit there overnight. I find that's a pretty easy way to glue it on, and you don't have to be super precise, and silicone's so sticky that you don't really have to hold it in place. So yeah, that's it for a stab tube or cable tube for the tail. That's all there is. And then make sure, so I like the leads up in here, so usually I keep it pretty far back so that where the extension leads that are actually in there, so they can't, like the part that you're plugged together, can't really flop around and unplug by accident. So yeah, that's it. I'm just going to glue it in now, and that's pretty much it for the stab tube cables, or the cable tube for the stabs.